Hello, and welcome back to Black Sheep Game Geeks. I'm Al.
I'm Ash.
And today we're talking about objectives.
Why they matter.
What are they good for?
And how to use them to make your gameplay more interesting.
Let's go.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute basics. What is an objective?
So obviously, the simple answer is an objective is a goal. Pretty straightforward and simple. What that means for gaming is it gives you a set of parameters to a mission rather than just your basic, hey, we're going to shoot at each other till someone's dead, or whatever the game is that you're playing.
Well, that is fun, the shooting till someone's dead. It is nice to have, like, a goal to break things up a little bit.
It really is. So adding an objective to the game is giving yourself mission parameters to actually achieve victory that doesn't have to be eliminating the entire enemy force. We're going to talk about why that's important and what that does for completely changing the aspects of a game in many cases.
So, why does using an objective help? Like, why does it matter?
I mean, really when it comes down to it, most games always try to make sure that everything is as balanced as possible. So since most of our videos so far have been about Dust 1947, they're a great example of where this comes into play. With Dust, every unit in the game is for the most part really well balanced. However, that doesn't always show clearly because when you play something like Steel Guard against the original Rangers units from the Fantasy Flight days, how does that feel? Yeah, that says that it's a pretty rough fight to have happen for the Rangers. They're usually going to feel like they're just getting stomped on. And it's easy for people to complain saying, well, that's because the game's not balanced. And it really is when you take objectives into account. The moment that you have something that plays to the Rangers' strength, that takes away from the Steel Guard a little bit, it really does help balance the playfield. Steel Guard are extremely powerful units in Dust. They have very high armor. They usually have abilities that increase their survivability, like damage resilience or assault shields, all kinds of tricks up their sleeves.
They're brutal.
They are brutal. However, the Rangers usually have greater mobility, and in many cases, they do actually have more guns at their disposal for a variety of circumstances that can really be used to their advantage. So if you have an objective that's a simple capture this and hold it for a certain amount of turns, that allows someone like the Rangers to really shine in a scenario and be able to take a victory from the Steel Guard that elsewise the Steel Guard were probably going to get just off of sheer strength. Gives a real good way to balance forces in any game. Another example would be our upcoming videos talking about the Battletech tabletop game. How did it feel the first time you fought the clans in a straight shoot-up game?
Was that the one where I exploded like that?
Yeah, that would be the one where you and our son both...
It was exciting. It was fun, but it was very abrupt.
As a confrontation with clan mechs can be in Battletech. However, again, if we had played with an objective, however, the confrontation between the Inner Sphere forces and the clans would have been a totally different dynamic, because with the proper objective, you can cut the advantages of range and accuracy the clan mechs just innately have and really help out.
I feel like it changes the dynamic from just being stats versus stats to, like, strategy becoming a much bigger part of the game, and it kind of adds a new level to the gameplay.
And it really does. It's a way that completely changes the flavor of the game. It takes it from being just a rock, paper, scissors type scenario very much into a strategy where you can actually change the strengths of almost any army and completely put things on its head depending on the scenario. And we've seen that happen many times, both when we're running Dust events at Little Shop of Magic here in Vegas, as well as when we have done games even at home or with friends, that a proper scenario and objective, it doesn't just give you a little bit different, it completely changes the game, really.
Yeah, and it can make it where instead of just playing like this army versus that army every single time, it's kind of starts feeling stale, but you could have the same two armies go up against each other like 10 different times with 10 different objectives, and it's going to be a completely different game every time.
Well, and even playing with the same armies and the same objective, sometimes it will play out totally different between matches, and it really adds more dynamic.
A lot more variety.
Yeah. Variety is a good word for it.
I like it.
And here we are all about variety.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple different types of objectives and how to use them.
We're going to cover some basic objective ideas that a lot of people seem to use, like capture and hold, escort missions, seek and destroy, and capture the flag type objectives.
We would love to hear what your favorite objectives are to use in the comments. If it's one of these or if it's something completely different, we want to hear what you guys like to use in your games.
Talking about those objectives also is going to be kind of that, like, how do you use them to really change the game and why they do that? Starting us off, we'll go ahead and talk about the capture and hold style objectives.
It's the one I've seen the most often.
It is one of the most common. So with that, typically is you're going to have your game. Everybody's setting up, you know what forces you're bringing, but then there's that twist to the match where there is an objective somewhere on the board that you have to get to and secure it before the enemy, and then hold that without being able to have the enemy snake it from you for a certain period of time.
Another common objective is escort missions, where you're basically a bodyguard, so your job is to escort a unit or an object across the board safely without getting destroyed.
Which also kind of becomes part of that assassinate or seek and destroy missions, which sometimes you don't necessarily know what the objective is and where it's located. So you have to get in, find what you're looking for, destroy it, and then get out of the area alive. Sometimes it can even just be as simple as get in and destroy it. If you succeed, who cares if the troops survive? It could be a fun time.
The final one for this video is capture the flag, which I think is pretty common to all types of gaming.
Just about everything. We all played it in grade school. We still play it now, just usually with plastic miniatures.
It's much better for asthmatic folk like myself. Earlier, we briefly touched on how using an objective could add depth and variety to your gameplay. A solid example of this would be using objectives to make your games more challenging if you feel that they're going too quickly, or it seems like it's getting boring or too easy for one side or both sides. So if you add an objective, you could do it in such a way that makes the gameplay take longer, or it takes new strategies that you're not used to. If you find that you're playing against an opponent who tends to take forever to get around to
making their move.
Thank you. We've all had those games where you play against somebody and it takes hours when it could take hours less than that. An objective generally causes them to speed up because they now have a common goal somewhere in the middle of the board, as opposed to just trying to hold out as long as possible and like hide in a corner and try to outweight you.
Or at the very least, it forces the game to become shorter when instead of having an indefinite amount of time where you're chasing someone around the board hoping to kill that last unit, you now have an objective that once it's captured, you have a limited time to do something about it, or you've practically forfeited your win of the game by letting the other person take and hold control.
Yeah.
It completely changes the dynamic of how you have to play to respond to that. You either are aggressive to capture that objective and defend it, or you're going to lose. It's that simple.
So it's a really good tool for changing the speed of gameplay if that's a problem in your play groups.
Likewise, a escort mission, in contrast, is a good way of adding a little bit of length to a game. If your opponent is really good and they lay a good ambush, you might end up with a short game anyways. But elsewise, if you have an opponent that you know they typically bring slow, really tough units, and you're challenging them to an escort mission where your faster units are an asset, it's going to make it a lot more interesting as they have to try and figure out how to prevent you from getting across the board, or they're going to be trying to chase you for the rest of the game, and it can add a little extra length instead of just those really quick stomp on someone matches. A lot of games also will offer some kind of module for a campaign that you can run that's really good for changing things up, because with those objectives, what used to be a let's mash armies together until someone's done, either because they fell asleep or they just ran out of units, really changes because now the story matters. Each mission, you have to do those objectives to make sure that the story progresses in your favor. It can really change up the dynamic if you are having to defend an objective because that objective earns you reinforcements in the next game that will completely change future outcomes. Or simple things like a seek and destroy mission where if you lose that unit or you lose a supply truck, suddenly your units are without the reinforcements or they're without critical supplies that you were anticipating potentially several missions down the line that will derail your entire efforts at winning a campaign. So objectives bring a lot of diversity to games, and they will change the way you approach each mission, each match that you play to try and figure out how best your units can come. And you'll find yourself, instead of bringing the same superpowered units and playing some meta, you now have to think about what the objective might be that you will encounter and how to best suit that. And that was something that I think Star Wars Armada really got down with the way that they make players choose a series of objectives that then when setting up your missions, you actually have to choose whose objective you're going to use, and it can completely derail somebody's plans for the fleet that they brought to the game, which is part of the excitement to that game as well. You never know if you have the optimal fleet, and it's learning to respond to that and think on your feet that will also make your gameplay in the future so much better as you learn what your units are capable of, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how to leverage that against enemy players.
Plus, just having higher stakes makes it that much more exciting for everybody involved.
Yeah, any game you can go in and say, I smashed my opponent, but when you can go in with real stakes on the line and you can show that you outthought your opponent and that you outmaneuvered them, that is a great thing, especially when your opponent brought what should have been a superior force, but you won anyways. It's a great feeling. So we hope that this video has helped people new to tabletop gaming understand what objectives are. And for people who don't normally include objectives into their games, we hope it's given you something to think about how it brings an enrichment to any game that you play and really will help bring balance to all the different units and how they perform on the table. With that, we will have in the description section below a link to our friends over at the Bolter Club with some great scenarios and stories that they've written for Dust 1947.
And even if you don't play Dust 1947, it could do you a world of good to look at what resources they do have, because it might inspire you for some sort of similar gameplay dynamics in your own games, even if it's not Dust.
They have a lot of great ideas, and it shows that sometimes they can be serious. Most of the time with Bolter Club, it's rather whimsical, but that is a wonderful thing that really will help make your players have a great time playing and come back looking to play another match with you. And ultimately, that's what tabletop gaming is really about. It's about building community and doing things as a community and having fun. Because without that, why are we doing it?
Right.
Thanks, guys, for watching our video. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, be safe and roll on. What is an objective? It's a goal.
Goal! You ready?
Oh, let's give it a shot.